How you doing, sir? There's often a comparison between Western knife sharpening and sharpening stones, which are usually oil stones, and Japanese knife sharpening, or you tend to use water stones, And I had mentioned this fact at one time to Cliff Stamp, was about what's an oil stone, a water stone, and he actually made a video on this. It was very, very interesting, as I made a comment on the forum, and he was like, "There's no such thing as an oil stone or a water stone. There's just sharpening stones. What you tend to put on and how it reacts, it's a whole other thing." But there's like stones that do better with water. There's stones that do better with oil, etc. So I found that very interesting. And what Cliff managed to do is because he was a physicist, and so he knew how to run tests and scientific tests and stuff. Science isn't you got to be in a lab and all that. Science is just a simple method. You know, you have a problem, you have an idea of how to fix that problem or make something work or do something that hasn't been done before or improve on something. You try it out, see if it works. And if it doesn't, you try something else and you go start over and do it again until you get something. And hopefully you can, somebody else can see your work and replicate it and have similar results and everything goes good. We don't have to have you don't have to have peer review and all that's for medical stuff. You don't have to have peer review. You don't have to have, $1 million, $3 million lab. You don't have to have a lab coat, test tubes, all this stuff. Science is just a process of thinking, observing, and doing. So what humans have been doing forever. Pattern recognition is what we're good at. Pattern recognition. Okay? There's a good book. Good book. William Gibson did a good book called Pattern Recognition. It's part of a series. He does these series of 3 books, and there's actually 3 series, just 3. And then there's a whole other book he just did, which is cool. Actually, it was on Amazon. There's made a TV show about it called The Peripheral. I liked it. I liked it a lot. A lot of people didn't like the show. I liked the show because I read the book. The book was like, I liked the book. A lot of people don't like William Gibson. He thinks he's a hack, and Philip K. Dick. I don't think there's no competition. You're writing sci-fi novels is not a competitive sport. It's an art. One guy writes this way, one other guy writes that way. Like William Gibson definitely has a style of writing. You can see it. You read his books. It's definitely a style and stuff. Philip K. Dick is a little bit more nebulous, but as far as a style, but as far as getting their message across and painting a picture of the world that they're talking about and the story they're telling, both incredible, amazing people. And wish Philip K. Dick was still here, but he's not. A lot of his stuff, unfortunately, that he wrote about has come to be true, and that's a sad fact. They're watching a guy on the internet saying, how Pat Buchanan, yes, Richard Nixon's Pat Buchanan. Pat Buchanan had sussed out what was going to happen in this country. Now, mind you, this is not that far out of reality because everyone said as soon as the Soviet Union goes away, we are going to face our own, the United States, that is, we are going to face our own internal struggles and frictions and stuff we haven't solved. We're not have barely anything to unite us, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we're going to fall apart. And that's what's happening. So, all right. So my main point was talking about Cliff was that he used science, used testing methods to come up with, and also his experience for years in sharpening and talking on blade forums and stuff with other knife sharpeners. He came up with a very, very, very good way to sharpening, which actually, just by chance, just by how the stones behave, the sharpening stones, that is, combined Western knife sharpening with Eastern or Japanese knife sharpening. Now, what would you? It's called the 3-step process. You got shortened to the plateau sharpening thing because if you do the 3-step method long enough, you're able to cut out a couple steps and just get straight to apexing the thing of the knife, and you can, and it saves time, and it just we all had come up with it at the same time because we'd been all doing on Cliff's forum the three-step method, ever since Cliff had we introduced it, we had all been using it. So we all, pretty much hit the same point of discovery result at the same time. We're like, well, if you can do this, if you know where you're on the stone, you can tell, how where the apex, where how close you are to apexing the knife. You can just skip, the middle point, just go straight to apexing and you're good. And you get results. It just takes, I have some neuropathy in my hand, so I sometimes result to burst sharpening just because I can't feel sometimes, and it's harder for me to feel what's going on, because it's really important when you're three-step sharpening to be able to feel what's going on the stone. It's not necessary now. It's not absolutely necessary. You can actually accidentally form a burr on the three-step sharpening, and you can just get rid of the burr the same way. Nothing would change in the three-step method. It's not a big deal, except maybe the length of it. If it's, you accidentally made a really large burr, it could take longer time to remove it. But and it reminded me once, I was like, I watched Cliff's three-step video, and I was like, well, how do you know when to stop on the stone, right? Because I had like been doing like the Murray Carter's sharpening on with wet stones, and I've been doing burr sharpening on the oil stones. I looked at them as two different things at the time, and I was getting really good results with the Murray Carter technique, because it turns out it's pretty much like, as my friend Kylie Harris told me, Murray Carter technique is pretty much the Cliff Stamp three-step technique. It's just, which is Japanese knife sharpening, which is, and you wind it up and you see Western knife sharpening is pretty much the same issue, just different ways of approaching the same thing with different, slightly different tools at your disposal, but pretty much, same idea. You're doing the same thing. You're trying to apex the edge of the knife to be sharp. So what Cliff did is he took a three-step method. What we have here is a thing where you cut off the edge of the knife for two reasons. One, to get rid of the damaged, weakened, or deformed steel. And two, to give yourself a reference point on how far you are to apexing the knife. You cut off, then you look right down the center knife with a flashlight, and it'll reflect back at you where it's been flat, where you've cut off the edge of the apex on the stone. And I'd heard about this technique in a previous knife sharpening book I had read at the Multnomah County Library. Yes, I'm in Portland, Oregon. Don't feel sorry for me. I love the city. It's born and raised here. It's amazing. If you don't believe me, come visit. It looks a little third worldish now, but that's the whole West Coast. It's not just Portland. I read about that, and he called it candling the edge. So you take a flashlight or a light source or whatever, and luckily I have this flashlight around me, on my wear, so I can usually, it makes it easier to do the three-step method versus having to go to a separate thing. Usually you should have, if you do your sharpening, you should get everything together so you have all your tools out there. But sometimes I just sharpen on the fly and don't have everything. Make do. Shouldn't do that. I should prepare properly and do stuff. It's a whole thing. So Cliff, first step, cut off the edge, like razor. It's also a lot like the straight razor sharpening, because I was doing that for a while. I don't shave, so I don't know how good my edges were, but I would, I'd sharpen a razor, for fun, but like, obviously I didn't shave with them. So there's something to do. I like collecting straight razors anyways. I like straight razors. It's interesting as a type of knife. I like knives. Straight razors also will they call it glassing, or the edge, and it smash the edge down, to get rid of the apex if you over sharpen and got a burr, because they do one side, alternating passes, mostly. Sometimes they do scrubbing stuff. Mostly it's alternating passes, and they slowly, kind of sneak up on the edge, where they get it to where they want it. And asked Cliff about what he thought about that one time, and like, similarities between the three-step techniques. Like, yeah, I see the similarities. It's, the way that and there's no offense to uh straight razor community or how they sharpen, or what they do is they work, it works, but for him, he just thought, it seemed a little bit like mopping the floor with a toothbrush, which, I mean, I could see, um, doing alternating passes, over like, 50 passes, 100 passes. It's like, so it's an investment. Cliff was, like, it's funny thing is, like, some of the, like, Cliff was a really good knife sharper. Another knife sharper was Kylie Harris, Mobley, the knife maker, used to be, doesn't like knives. Like, it really didn't enjoy the knife sharpening process. I like the knife sharpening process. Like, I used to think 45 minutes on a Waterstone is awesome. I love that. That's why I like sharpening straight razors. It takes a while to do it right. And I like that. But the more I got into it, and understood that you don't have to take that amount of time when we doing other things. Like, we have a limited amount of time in the day, we have a limited amount of time in the week, we have a limited time in the month, we have a limited time in the year, and we have a limited time on this planet. Use your time effectively and wisely, wisely. Like during my youth, I wasted a huge amount of time doing stuff that was just, you know, malicious to my being, malicious to my being. All right. So anyway, so after you glass the edge, you cut off the edge. Okay. You have a flat smash down piece of it. You can see it with the light source, smash down thing. And now, funny thing is that when I first started knife sharpening, like started buying knife sharpening stuff and getting into it, I thought when they meant color in the edge with a Sharpie, I thought it meant doing this, like cutting down the edge, because I thought the actual very apex was the edge and everything else was a secondary or primary grind. I didn't know that the actual edge, I didn't think the edge was that actually the what you were grinding on. I didn't learn this till later. So I really started getting serious about it and reading books and investing instead of just you know following the instructions on the box, basically, which is like, go back and forth 5 times and that's it. Um, and um, so we cut off the edge thing. So I used to just paint that part, and it was very hard to see. It didn't work. Found out later you're supposed to color in the whole side, and made it easier. But then I had a problem, sometimes telling, when I actually hit the edge, because, if you use like a dark color, sometimes, if you don't have a white, like a light background, it's hard to see. So I started using like reds and greens, or, not, I said it worked for like the blues and black pens, but I used red and green pens that stood out more if there was a little sliver of stuff. But you can sharpen for a while, and, depending on the knife, and not yet, especially if it's really thick behind the edge. So it's back to the thing. We cut off the edge, cut off the edge. All right. And other people call it joining. I've heard it two ways: joining and jointing. Joining or jointing the edge. Cut off the edge. All right. Got a thing you can look at. See where you're at. The closer you get to apex in a knife, the less reflection you're going to get. And when you start getting really close, it'll be spotty. And then when you're almost there, there'll be nothing at all. And then, I asked Cliff, like, when how far, when you're not seeing any light anymore, about how many passes per side, alternating passes per side, are you close to apexing the edge? He said about 20 to 30. So I try to go on about that. I mean, again, it all depends on your sharpening equipment, the knife, how the thickness behind the edge, et cetera, how hard you're pressing down, sharpening stones you're using, et cetera. So first step, cut off the edge. We get some reflection. Second part was gross removal of metal. All right. So you want to use a coarse stone, not too coarse of a stone, because it's just the same way as going into high sharpness stones. There's a thing of diminishing returns, like 8K versus 10K, 10K versus 12K, 12K versus 16K, 60K versus 20K, especially when you're dealing with knives. Straight razors is a whole other thing because you have the skin of the face, and it's a feel thing and a comfort thing, and it's not just the cutting action of the. That's why some people like the black Arkansas stones, because they or the transparent Arkansas stones, or just Arkansas, the higher grade Arkansas stones, the true hard Arkansas stones, because they say they have an they leave an intelligent edge, where the edge can tell the difference between hair and skin. Cut the hair but not the skin, which you think that would be a good stone to use for a beginner if they're beginning to shave, because you have less chance of razors pretty sharp, and you don't want to you got a nice scar right here. You don't want to have a nice face. I mean, I don't know. Some chicks like the facial scars. I think facial scars are cool. Not everybody likes them. Some people like their pretty face. Yeah. So you got gross removal of metal. All right. So what we're trying to do here is get the the light to where I said before, where it's just dotted or first, and then eventually get to where you're not seeing a reflection of any light anymore. It's just you're looking down and it's just you see a dark thing. You don't see the light reflecting. So corrosive removal metal, you can scrub back and forth, alternating, whatever you want to do, just whatever gets there. But like the thing is, you don't want to use too coarse of a stone, like I was saying, diminishing returns. It'll too coarse of a stone will leave big gouges in the steel. And since we're not going back and completely erasing those, and even if you do, there's still some that are deep. It takes a lot of removal metal. We're not doing it. We're saving time. We're saving metal. We're saving, and it turns out money, because you're sharpening stones on even sharpening lubricant, sharpening stones, sharpening on the knife itself, wear and tear on a knife. So, um, you know, start looking for corrosion removals. Too deep of gouges. Okay, so anywhere from 120 to 220. I know it's super coarse, but it's where you want to be. You don't want to be in the 80s and 90s. The extra courses or whatever. That's about where you want to be. And then so as soon as you get to the spot where it's either dashed, where you can see some reflection but it's broken apart, or it's pure straight line, and you want to move on to a stone where it leaves it has a resin, is a resin, like a type of resin stone. It leaves a colloidal slurry, where it's like a muddy slurry. And how you tell the difference between a muddy slurry and a non-muddy slurry? Well, not well, like the cutting things. You'll see a shot peen. You look at it under magnification, it'll look like a shot peen thing, like it'll look, um, kind of hazy, and you won't see, straight striations. It'll just look like, like kind of like a gray haze, and that's what you want, because what that does is not only does it prepare the apex, the edge of the knife to be apexed cleanly, without a burr. When there's always a burr, somewhat, there's always, just remove, especially when you're dealing with metals, um, uh, remove material by plastic deformation. So, like a ceramic, which is, like chipping and breaking off. Plastic, you have plastic deformation when it comes to metals. I get most metals to get up in, I guess, the ceramic, close to the ceramics. I don't know. But most metals we're dealing with plastic deformation. Could be all metals. I don't, I'm not used to saying all or whatever. Steels we're dealing with, it's mostly going to be plastic deformation. Okay, you got plastic deformation. So that stuff, and you move out. So imagine just taking your hand and going like this in some loose dirt. You see like the furrows burr up on each side, and you have a gouge and stuff. And then when you do it down, there's a little look after that's a burr. There's always a burr the thing is just you have a foil burr or a false edge, that's actually on the edge, where it's actually a whole thing, versus just a little bit of residue from the grinding. So you always have a little bit of residue from the grinding, because plastic deformation, just how the material removal happens with metals, like I said, with material removal when it comes to ceramics. Again, that is a like more like a chipping like process. So sharpening ceramic knives is different process, a different thing. So we want to kind of get a shot peen kind of edge, and where it's because what that you turn going to three body abrasion pretty much now is with you have the colloidal, the muddy slurry, you have the stone, and you have the edge, and the the colloidal slurry is slowly abrading, the edge right at the thing, kind of working like how a leather strop works when it bends over. It's kind of not the exact process, but it's doing a similar thing where it's just hitting the burr and it's not really getting the edge of the edge of the edge bevel. The stone's getting most of the edge bevel, a little bit of the edge, and for this you want to do, alternating passes. Alternating passes, you want to cross the scratch pattern, turn the knife at a 45-degree angle. The stone, if possible. Sometimes knives with flippers or guards, it's kind of hard to, but you want to try to go to a 45-degree angle, this way, that way, on the stone. Is it just cuts off the burr. The striations are one way, you come another way like this, and it'll cut off the burr also. Another burr. So you want to do these burr minimization techniques, alternating passes. This is all edge forward for these last parts. First part where you gross metal removal, you're just scrubbing it, however you're getting the metal off. I just, trying to do it evenly on each side. Now we're talking about just alternating passes. Alternating passes. Sometimes you scrub, but I usually just like to do alternating passes for the burr minimization and preparing for the apex. So now this is where you want to start, paying attention to how many passes you're doing, and so like I said, come by count, because I had asked Cliff, because like I said, I had the feeling problem in my hands. That's why I wanted to count how many passes, or know about how many passes were for your average steel to, before you apexed. And like I said, he said 20 to 30, 20, 25, 30, somewhere around there. So that's I start counting. Most people, or if I'm having a good day and my hand's not bothering me or whatever's going on, it's the weather, I don't know. But you want to you can actually feel the edge getting close to apex and getting close to being sharp, and it'll start feeling like a little bit of a suction or a drag on the with the knife, instead of like it's like a steady, vibration, like a grinding. You start feeling a little bit of a like I said, a suction motion, or like a hydraulic feel, or um, a uh, a a kind of it dragging. You feel like a little friction, like it's dragging more than it was, and that's a good thing. That means you're close to apex. And hopefully you should be using a sharpening lubricant. Either just some kind of mineral oil, or soap and water. Just water is fine. Any combination of the both, like good it's good some good um homemade sharpening solutions that you can make. You can like do 4 parts water, 1 part oil, 1 part dish soap, which is I find a good general all around. Where I learned that from Blister Steel, the guy on YouTube and the forums. Blister Steel, really good knife, a razor sharpener guy, straight razor. He's a good guy too. He's awesome. So check out Blister Steel on YouTube and stuff. I haven't seen one of his videos for a while, but I used to watch him all the time. I don't really watch much of anything except like watching guitar stuff lately. So, that's me. But yeah, Blister Steel, and so I modified, because that was his formula for like hard finishing stones, like like a surgical black Arkansas, or a translucent black Arkansas. There's other ones, but because if you ever notice with the harder stones, they're kind of hydrophobic. The water, like if you just use water, which is want to use a thinner thing on the harder stones, thinner lubrication, or lubricant on the harder stones, especially the finer ones, so you can it makes it easier to cut than if it's a nice, thick one. I made a thicker sharpening solution. I made a variation on Blister Steel's formula. I put 1 part water, 1 part oil, 1 part oil, 1 part dish soap. And that was because um I like a more um like gelatin like or like more like dish soap type more viscous um sharpening solution for most stuff, even the hard stones. Um, I find it works better for me. You try whatever works for you. Go for it. So once we get to the point where we either cut on 20 passes or 30 passes, or you're gonna check for a burr, and also or 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 you're starting to feel the edge drag, starting to feel the edge drag. Then what you want to do is you want to, check for a burr, using your fingernail or some other method, see if you feel, a little something grabbing on one side, like a little lip of something. Or, you could have a burr, you could not. It's not going to matter in the final, setting of the thing. That's what this Cliff was telling me, because I asked him, like, like I was saying before, how do you know when to stop, and what happens when you don't? Because I was watching him on his 3-step sharpening video. He was just going, and he stopped, and he like knew where to stop. He's like, well, first of all, I sharpened that knife like 20 times that day, so he had a pretty good feeling. Like, oh, okay, all right, that makes sense. Because I'm taking just a knife, just picking one up that I have and trying. And I'm like, you're not having any idea where it goes with a knife. It helps if you have a knife that you've sharpened a couple times before. I suggest like a Victorinox paring knife, something that's, inexpensive but good quality, to especially to learn on or to practice on, it don't cost a lot of money. The plain blade ones, plain edged ones, you can do the 4-inch one, or there's a 3 1/4 inch ones, and they're also good all around utility knives. It's one of the things I've been working on making is I make little sheaths for these little knives, and I regrind them and stuff. The whole thing, I haven't been doing it the last couple of years because I wasn't really safe to be using power machinery, but doing better now, so I should be cranking these out again and get whatever orders I didn't have finished done. Thank you, my awesome customers who have been patient through this time I've been sick. So I really appreciate it. So you use something like that to practice on, and you'll sharpen it, a bunch of times in a day. Just have a practice knife, practice stone, use the same stone, use the same, or do the same set of stones, and you'll see it's a whole you'll start to, or you should start. You may not. It's just uh um but you want to use like kind of a light. You don't use a lot of pressure in these last steps. You want to alternating passes, and most people can start feeling a difference and can tell where they are on the edge. Just practice until you get it right. If you can't get it, it's fine. It's like what I asked Cliff. He's like, well, what happens if you make a burr? So it's not a big deal. It's like, what happens if you burn toast? You just scrape off the burnt part, you eat the toast. You know, it's like, all right, that makes sense. Cliff was good at giving like real world analogies to situations. I'm not. I have to either explain it, that how I see it, or that's it. Not good. Cliff was really good at explaining, stuff in a simpler manner. A lot of the stuff I'm using, I got from Cliff, uh, because my mind just doesn't work like that. Cliff, Cliff was a lot smarter guy than I was, or am. Cliff was a lot smarter guy than, or even when I was a lot, supposedly a lot brighter, I was younger. But I had 3 concussions back to back to back in car accidents, and my brain hasn't been the same. I'm not complaining. I'm happy I'm here. Like I shouldn't have lived through a couple of those car accidents, but I'm still here. So that's how it goes. It's like they say Humpty Dumpty, right? Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall, you know. Rather be here than not be here. So or once you go back to the knife sharpening, once you get to the point where the knife starts dragging, or or if you do have a burr, it's just fine. We're going to the same thing, same thing. You get your finishing stone, the grit you want to finish with. All right. Yeah. Now I like, and Cliff like to use where I got it from Cliff. Cliff like to use the Spyderco Sharp Maker, and and I like using the Sharp Maker for this too. I've gotten the new Spyderco Golden Stone and the Spyderco Webfoot, which is the 600 CBN version of the Webfoot. The Webfoot is a fine is a fine uh Spyderco ceramic. It's a fine grit. Although I learned from Sal Glesser of Spyderco, who he's an awesome guy. He sent me the Spyderco Sharp Maker unit I have. No charge, just gave it to me. Like awesome. Really kind, knowledgeable, generous, amazing human being. Sal Glesser. If you ever have a chance to meet the man in person, go up and say hi to him. If you're at one of these knife shows, I don't think he goes to big knife shows, but so I got him. When Oregon, when the Blade Show West was here, and I learned from Sean Houston, Big Brown Bear, that the show was going to be here. Blade Show West. I got to meet so many people. I've been reading about in in uh in knife magazines and articles and all this stuff for years. I got to meet Ethan Becker and meet Michael Janich. I was just amazed. I got to see whole collection of Randalls in person. Like if you get to a knife show, whatever one it is, go there. Do yourself a favor. Go. The knife community is amazing. And if you're into like building knives or building sheaths or making handles, there's vendors and equipment there. Or sharpening stuff. There's all sorts of stuff there. Like I walked around just like once, and I was exhausted. It like 2 hours. I met Mike Emler there. Mike Emler was out there, and him and Nico and a couple other of his. Watched Mike Emler's channel. A couple other of his people watched the channel. We already walked around it. I think just the video's still up on Mike Emler's. It's like a 3-hour video. They're filming the whole time. We're just walking around seeing, and Mike's an amazing guy. He's a great character. He's very charismatic. Very charismatic guy, and he's friendly and professional with everybody, but nice, and having good humor at the same time, having a great time. And all of us are on the video, just walking around, looking at all the cool stuff at Braid Show West. Unfortunately they did it one more year and they didn't do it anymore because Portland is not exactly the shining beacon on the hill it once was. But it's just still a great knife community. Still have great knife companies here, great knife culture. Even the progressives here, seem to be a little knife friendly, which is, awesome. I mean, I'm apolitical myself. I of course have my own political leanings and beliefs, but I'm apolitical. What it is. As long as you're nice to me, I'm nice to you. Live and let live, all that stuff. The world's big enough for all of us. World's big enough for all of us. Any type of idea you have, as long as you're not hurting anybody else, you knock yourself out. So, but we're coming. Uh, you use you want to use like some kind of maybe fixed angle thing, like a V sharpener, or like um uh let me see here. Where's the thing? Where's the sharpener? Find it. One second. Here, here we go. This is a good example of, things you can use for this right here is not a bad device at all. I'd like to design my own one day because like I said, I my own way of sharpening stuff. But this is a pretty good, pretty good little device. They make even a Benchmade branded one. I've got the because I carry it with, I've got the plates turned inside out. Yeah, it's a little work sharp pocket sharpener. It's got a little strop, even though you don't really need to use a strop the way I sharpen. But it's got it's got a extra coarse, a 220 grit plate for gross material removal. It's got the 325 diamond with that, and along with the fine India stone. Those are great all around edges for pocket knives. And then ooh, if it'll show it, it's got the ceramic rod with a couple grits on it. They put some striations on there too, grits, and you've got the fish hook stuff, and then I've got the Sean Houston Triple B mod where I took out the pin here so I can remove this if I want to and be able to. It's easier than because there's a kind of a little bit of a edge or a lip right on this where it has, and sometimes it's hard to get the access the whole rod. But this is a good. You can do the 3-step sharpening with this. This is piece of equipment. You can use like a DMT, um, DMT little diafolds. This is a portable stuff. We're using it, but what I wanted to show you here on the Work Sharp. Oh yeah, Work Sharp. They have like a fixed angle system. It's like a triangle on like the V sharp shape of the Spyderco, but they've got the same. They got different grits. So you can use. And they got a newer one where it's more like a edge KME, KMT, one of those KMEs. I think it's KME. Yeah. Anyway, but what I wanted to show you was these guides, these angle guides. See these angle guides right here. Is you want to try to keep when you apexing, because that word is we're doing the final step of the knife sharpening. What you're doing here is you want to apex the knife. So you want the angle accuracy is going to improve sharpness. It's going to reduce is going to reduce, damage to the knife takes. And more, perfect the knife is, the less it, wobbles. Like Cliff was fond of telling the stories that Buck knives did a test where they put this titanium nitride coating on blades. You see them they're on utility blades often, like Lex and Gold and stuff. They have them, and and uh and they found that on the catcher machine it would cut for a very long time, longer than the steel would without. And they also use these coatings like in razors, and like disposable razors, or like little Gillettes and all that stuff. Roman Landis, he let me look at his work that he did for his master's degree, and it's on razor steel. It says steel he recommends for high performance knives, as the ABL 13C26. So it's really good steel. Triple B just did a video, or was it Laren Thomas or Triple B did a video. I think it might have been Laren Thomas. Um, Come to think of it, but he did a video. Somebody did a video on how AEBL got its name. I can't remember if it was Larry Thomas or Triple B, Sean Houston. I watch those guys all the time. And they've been working together, doing great work. Like Larry Thomas coming out with just game changing knife steels, just amazing stuff. Like if the fact that you can do any improvement in metallurgy, nevertheless cutlery, knife stuff is, fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Because it's really so, usually a lot of times with knife steels, or what's been the case is we take steels that are made for other purposes and we use them for knives. It's been the history of it. To have like a purpose-built knife steel for pocket knives, it's just amazing. So we had to get my hands on some MagnaCut, but it's I like a steel choice, to be honest, on the knife is the last thing I really choose. I like the design first, the cost, ergonomics, safety, you know, blade shape, blades, a whole bunch of other stuff. You know how thin, you know, if it's a thin and grind, thick grind, you know, how a whole bunch of other stuff before I decide, you know, what the blade steel is, you know, or care. Like it, you know, uh, OS 6 or you know 8CR13, OS 8, uh, uh, 420 HC, anything's fine. I had no problem with using those steels. Are cool. Um, maximize the performance out of my this videos that Cliff showed. You can do this. It's not hard to do. Well, so anyway, back to the Buck story. Well, the Buck was noticing that on the Catra, they'd have the titanium nitride steel, just cut a long time, longer than the blade steel. But they noticed that when they built the knife and put it in somebody's hand, and I guess Cliff was telling you all this all the time because it leads to what else Buck was doing, and then what Cliff was doing, what I'm telling you right now. It's an added thing. Is it's a bonus to the sharpening thing. So you know, you put it in somebody's hand, and the gains of the titrate, the titanium nitrate went away. And why is this? Because the Catra machine, solid, it says it just bam up and down, no problem, just solid. Person's hand wobbles a little. You have a little wobble to it. And that wobble, you know, the slightest height, you know, affects the edge, and it wears in a different manner. And that had me thinking, you know, if anybody takes this idea, or if they've thought of it before, good. We need it done. We need like a catcher machine that has a little bit of a wobble to it. You know, you can actually get a better like I was thinking, like, you know, just, you know, have a couple of brackets, and, you know, screws, like a little fixture where it just, you know, cut and was loose a little bit and cut different each time it went up, came down. You know? But you know, we just need a catcher machine that mimics that hand cutting process, or if that's possible, I don't know. But so catcher machines didn't measure up to the real world testing. Normally is, you know, pretty close for stuff for, you know, push cutting and slicing. So I think it just does slicing. I'm not sure if it does actual push, but anyway, um, uh, and that little wear was negating any benefit or any cost or whatever that Buck found from the titrating of the knife blades, the knife edge. So that went out. No, what they did come up with was I think it's the Edge 2000. And what they did is, instead of sharpening their blades at 20 degrees per side or 40 degrees inclusive, they sharpened them at 15 degrees per side or 30 degrees inclusive. And now what that did is that increased the edge retention phenomenally. You can see in their graphs, they have all the data up on it. You can look on the website. And mind you, you're using 420 HC. You know, that's not like, you know, a premium at all knife edge. Just average, you know, steel used for knives, 420 high carb. Um, and and you know, I like this. I don't have I don't mind sharpening my knives either. You know, or you know, if you sharpen enough, you got to buy one. Also, you know, I got a 1x30, you know, Harbor Freight grinder, and I got a Tormek T4s. You know, so I've got my um, you know, power ways to you know, remove metal also, so it's, you know, easier. But you know, Cliff showed this. You know, he showed that, you know, you reduce the edge angle, you increase edge retention, you reduce cutting ability. No, maybe I think that's wrong. So something cutting ability does something, but it doesn't affect edge retention or something. I don't know, but you know, it's just, you get a sharper knife. I think it short angle, smaller angle, and thinner it is, it's behind the edge, more cutting ability. I have to look up cutting ability. I haven't looked at any of this stuff for a while. So Kylie Harris, if I watch the video, point out every error, which is good because I make a lot of mistakes. And I'm glad Kylie's there to catch. I wish Cliff was still here to point out my errors too. It's you know, I very rarely learn something from being right. I almost always, if I did what I was doing right, always learned something from being incorrect or wrong or saying the wrong thing. which is I try to, you know, try to learn something, you know, if I can, when I can, every opportunity is a be a better person tomorrow than I was today. So, so hopefully, so you know, we're talking about the fixed edge. So not only with the Apex, you know, easier and cleaner, it'll you know last a little longer than it maybe, and than if it's you know little not so accurate is what I'm getting at. Now you're of course you're going to have you know there's always imperfections even you know blades that are ground by machine and there's you know imperfections and still nothing is perfect. You know, dealing with we just don't live in a perfect nothing's 100%, but you know you want to you know closer to ideal than not, and that's what we're looking. So final steps here is and off of the burr minimization, what you need to do, or what you should do is take some newsprint. Newsprint's hard to find. Is phone book paper is like almost non-existent. There's receipt paper, you know, but something you know thinner than printer paper because printer paper is a pretty low bar for being able to test stuff. So, but what I started using is tissue paper. Like you see all these people cutting, you know, bathroom tissue with knives. You heard tissue paper was hard something hard to cut a good knife, good sharp knife with tissue paper. I think they're talking about actual like you know like packing like decorative tissue paper. I think they were talking about that because that's more like what I was using, like the cigarette papers and stuff. I think that's more closely, and you know, that's readily available. Also, I got a whole bunch of it, and think that's a better test, and it's easier to get now than phone book paper. Phone book paper is hard to get, and so the other, you know, so is the newsprint paper. Newsprints are, you know, newspapers are pretty much not around that much. Also, I mean, there's still a couple free ones here, in Portland that you know you can get for look upcoming music shows and arts and movies and stuff. So, but and I guess the Oregonian is still Oregon's like only now comes out twice a week now. It used to be a daily paper, you know, and have a big Sunday edition. Now it's twice like Sunday and Thursday or something. But and it's a small little paper too. It's tiny, smaller than the free papers now. And I don't even know if the Portland Tribune is even still in business. I haven't seen any of their things for a while. I used to get a whole bunch of the free papers and read them. So it's just not that because I couldn't spend the 25 or 35 cents for the Oregonian, but I just Oregonian was just nothing in there I really cared about. Is maybe the sports section or you know if there's a movie playing. I've not the movies in over a decade either. So, you know, but I'm old, middle aged, and so it goes, and disabled. So and I get out and do as much stuff as I did when I was younger. Which is a funny thing I always heard saying, you know, no disparagement to you young people out there. Young people are awesome. We need them. We got to have them. They're amazing. You know, is that somebody once said that youth was wasted on the young. And I don't agree with that, but I can understand what he was saying. Like if I, you know, it's always this, you always hear this in songs. If I'd have known what I know now, then, you know, like if I know what I was when I was younger, I would have been in a lot better place. But, you know, there's some things you can't just learn from hearing them or reading them or, you know, just having the knowledge of something is you actually have to have the experience. You have to be at a certain spot in your life to understand things and get there before stuff really actually makes sense. And I don't think anything other than lived experience and time will do that, to be honest, you know. So I don't think youth is wasted on the young. I think we're all at the stage of our lives that we're supposed to be. And this life has life has its stages in speaking in generalities, and it's usually what happens here, there, and everywhere. So, right. So we're getting to Apex, and we wanna have you know, hopefully an angle guide. You don't have to, but it helps. Some kind of angle guide. And so I usually like the Spyderco Sharp Maker. Um Lansky makes, you know, their turn box, you know, uh, and Work Sharp makes their little triangle thing with the rotating rotating sharpening pieces. So pick the edge grit you wanna sharpen at. And but first, before you do that, you want to test, get some paper. You have to use printer paper, fine. But use whatever paper you got, and see if the edge cuts that you got off of the uh the the burr minimization slash apex preparation stone, which leaves the one with the colloid slurry, the muddy slurry, and water stone. So like your first stone, I'll go into the stones after this, but so then after that it should cut like advertisement paper, coupons, whatever. It should cut that paper both ways. Tape paper one way, cut it the other way because the paper has a grain. It'll cut easy one way or another way. So should cut both ways at point of hold. We're not looking for anything fancy like out to here. Just point of hold, boom, should push cut 9 degrees, 9 degrees. Another good thing I showed that I showed on film to Kylie and Cliff when they were helping me when I was doing my knife making stuff is my 90-90-90s weren't 90-90-90. They were close to 90 degrees, all three ways, but they weren't. And and I was rushing, going too fast. You just do nice and slow. It should just go right, right down. Just make sure you line up your angles, everything. So the difference between a true 90-degree everywhere point of hold and not is a big difference. And it really improved my knife sharpening because I had taken a break from knife sharpening. When I went back to it, I had not regained all my skills. Everything. I hadn't put enough practice in and stuff. And so when I was doing things again, I wasn't able to do what I was before, just like a couple years before, because I just pretty much stopped because I was sick and I had other things going on. My fiance was sick. It's this whole thing. It happens when you get older, and just happens to you sometimes in life. People get sick. So, what we're gonna do is we're gonna do about 5 passes per side on the on the uh on the fixed angle system. Now, like I was saying earlier, a fine India or a 325 DMT, or like a regular coarse grit, is going to be the more all around ideal grit for most utility tasks of a pocket knife. I've Now if you got like a two knife pocket knife, you see I got one here, like a uh, a Swiss Army knife, you can have main grit, like a coarse grit, and then the smaller knife, you use it for whittling or something, you can bring that to a higher grit. All this stuff is, same principles. So select the grit you want. And then 5 passes per side, check for burr, test the sharpness, and continue doing that. Only do it once or twice, maybe 3 times sometimes. And well, do it twice. Once should, if you get the sharpness you want, it should apex should be pretty uniform. You know, second time I usually micro bevel. I raise the edge of the angle of the knife up a little bit. Like here's the apex angle. I'll raise it up a little bit, give forward passes on both sides, alternating forward passes. And then the other last five passes per side I'll do is I'll go back to the original angle, and it gets rid of the micro bevel and it forms a clean apex. And that is, it's the original angle. There's no, now I've looked into this under microscope, and pretty much gets rid of the elevated micro bevel apex. And I would get a magnifying instrument, like at least a 10x loop, like Sal Glesser recommends. If you really want to get into stuff and having fun, get one of the digital microscopes you can use with a computer, or they have its own little screen you can take pictures with and stuff. You can really be able to see what's going on at the edge, and like where you're sharpening where it is, like you know, that's the other way to check where you are is optically to use magnification and see what the edge looks like. After a while, you're able to see what looks like what after doing sharpening a couple times and observing, you're able to figure out and see how you are. Now, I'm going to go into stones. Now, sharpening, so like I remember saying that the Cliff Stamp mixed uh, Eastern with Western sharpening stone. Now, I'm not saying about technique, although a little bit of the Murray Carter technique is pretty much similar to what Cliff Stamp does, but like with the Western stones, Cliff at what he did is like 2014, he ordered probably 20 or more stones, and he did write-ups on each one of them on the forum, uh, and did magnifications of what their grits look like, what their grit pattern on the edge look like, and it changed how he looked at sharpening. Instead of normally just grit progression, staying this one's go from lower to higher grit. It changed how he looked at stuff like coarse, coarse uh, extra coarse, I should say, extra coarse or extra coarse stones were good at gross edge removal, and they're just getting ready to get to where you're getting ready to prepare the apex uh, in the next step. And those stones he liked were the Sahiro chemical. It says 800, but it's actually like a 300 grit or 350 grit stone or whatever. But it's the product number is 800. If you look on the Sahiro site, it says it. Everybody's like there's lots of confusion, but if you actually go to the Sahiro website, even if you go to the Japanese one, it translate it'll say product number 800, and it'll give you the exact uh, uh, um, grit and in the JIS. That's what the grit. I'm using the JIS system for grits because the ANSI one is I'm not I was familiar with. That's what I used to use before I started using it. But it's because like when I heard like a 8,000 grit stone, I was like, oh wow, because they're grading surgical blacks at like 1,200 to 1,500 or 2,000 JIS. I mean not JIS but ANSI. I thought like, oh wow, that's fantastic. That's 8,000's got to be insane. It's not. It's they're about the same or a little less. It in the ballpark, but so um for those like the Suhiro chemical, uh the Norton crystalline either coarse or fine. Um Norton India coarse or fine. I guess I even probably would have liked the mediums too. And those stones are Norton crystalline, Norton India, uh the Sahiro, um, Sahiro chemical he liked, and I can't remember if we mentioned another stone. I think those are the ones he liked. He liked hard stone that you can put some pressure on. Like as you also varying pressures here. Usually people are, do one pressure, they use a little more pressure and then lighten up. But the very first step you can use, and a lot of force. You're gonna get removal, metal gone, quick. You want to use a lot of liquid, a lot of lubricant on there to, keep the stone clear and the swarf from the steel of the knife away from where you're cutting everywhere else. Keep that as much as possible. You can flush the stone if you have to. Um, and the sewer chemical, of course, is a so-called water stone, and the Norton and crystalline is so-called oil stone. Oil works better on the crystalline and the India stone. That's because they're hard. Their binder is hard, and the now the crystalline has silicon carbide. It's a little bit more friable than the India, which is aluminum oxide, not centered. It's aluminum oxide. It's fired or something. It's not centered though, I don't think. But anyway, it's a very hard aluminum oxide, and the stones that you can put a lot of pressure on, you can't gouge easy. You can use like oil and stuff if they're not absorbent. yeah, that like a a king 1K, put oil on that is it's going to make the stone behave different. Like I put oil on a task garden um hone. Again, I learned that from Cliff. Is 8-inch stone, I think, or 9-inch stone, something like that. Is a scythe sharpening stone. This work I think Cliff found that two course is not good. You want to stay at like the 120 to 220 grit rate. So I use that for that, but I used oil on it and just gunked up the stone. The stone stopped cutting. I used water on it, cut good and fast. So that's what you want to maintain a cutting average. So those three stones. So your chemicals, water stone, Northern India or Northern crystalline, which is a silicon carbide in their aluminum oxide uh, type for the gross steel. Right now, next thing, you can have a couple different stones in this. Because there's three, I think, uh that are good to use, and there happen to be a different grits, so that works out good too also. So what you have, the three stones you have that make, I'm sure there's probably other stones that leave a colloid resin um slurry, but these are the ones I have, and these are the ones that Cliff recommended. The Nanawa Superstone 400. I don't know what they call the Superstone now. They've changed the names a couple times. So, but whatever the Superstone used to be. Um, the King 1K, yes, the lowly King 1K, and the Nanawa Aotashi 2K stone, aka the Green Rickajoy. All you can use just one of those stones, or you can use all three of them. The Iotasha Green Brick of Joy, use lots of water of it on that because it's a very sticky stone. It's gouges easy. It's very soft. All these stones are very soft. They're resin bonded, very soft. You want to use a lot, soak them for a long, for a good amount of time. Make sure they're saturated water. Use lots of water on top, and you could use all three of those stones. If you want a really refined edge, or you just want to get stuff done, you can just do the 400 and then on to apexing or whatever you grit, but generally the higher the grit you want, the more steps in between and the higher grit you want to finish with. So the Ayatashi, the Nano Ayatashi 2K is leaves a pretty almost, it's like near a mirror finish. It's very high polish for a 2K stone. Like all the resin stones, they get lot of good feedback. You can really feel what's going on in the stone, and they they leave a pretty shiny edge. So however, you could use all three. You could just use the King 1K. You could just use it. Anawatashi. It depends on your skill level and what you're doing. If you're trying to get a perfect edge, or not, you want a polished edge, or shiny. Care if it's mirrored polish, doesn't matter. So, but you can do one of those stones. Okay. For finishing, now finishing is interesting. Finishing, you can go anywhere from an extra coarse to a super fine stone. Anywhere from, like, 120 JIS. It's got a lot of cardboard. It works, and or all the way up to 8K JIS, or the natural stones like translucent Arkansas, uh, surgical black Arkansas, little less high grit. You can use a soft Arkansas. Um, this is a soft Arkansas right here. These are two stones I usually like finishing on around. Is about the and the soft Arkansas is kind of like a Spyderco. It's around. It reminds me of a Spyderco medium ceramic, and that it's labeled a medium. Both stones are like kind of labeled medium, but they're pretty fine when you're comparing it to something like the 325 or the 220 or 120 stone, like the Norton Norton coarse crystalline or coarse India, you know or even the fine Indias. They're not even, I don't think they're up at the 320. I think they're in 280, 220 still. Um, And like Wayne Goddard he has this stone that Norton makes, and it's a pretty kind of similar idea, similar sharpening method. He wrote up it in 2001 or 2002 issue of Blade magazine. I have it around here somewhere, but it's it's a Norton medium crystalline and a Norton fine India. And the crystalline, because it's silicon carbide, he said it cut through almost any steels. And mind you, like this is like right when S30V is coming out, like S60V had come out before S90V, I think, had come out also, but um like earlier in the 90s, but this is just around 2000. So like they were still using like stuff like BG42 and 154 CM, ATS 34, stuff like this. Like the super steels as we know these days really hadn't come out, although they did have S60V and S90V at the time. But they mostly recommended diamond stones with them. And some people still recommend diamond stones for anything over S30V or LMAX or anything like that. I can see, it's not a bad recommendation. But, so so you want to pick the stone, for finishing stones, you want them to be flat, hard, and you want to use a lot of lubricant, usually a thin lubricant for finishing. Um, and light pressure when finishing, pretty much just the weight of the blade when you're finished. I got the best, yeah, I found I got the best results. And I again these from experiments I saw Cliff doing. I was able to replicate and get to work for me. So anyway, that is that on knife sharpening. You can contact me several ways. Here on YouTube is one of them. So if you want to leave me a comment, please do. Thank you very much.